So we're just going to wait a couple of minutes because I see people, trickling in. So we're just going to wait a couple of minutes to get started. If that's okay with everybody. If you've never used Zoom, you can go ahead and there's a reactions button, at the bottom of your screen, and you can say, clap your hands or something, say you agree with me. So I don't know how to unclap my hands. Usually I'm just clapping my hands from start to finish. So I never unclap my hands. Ha ha ha. I'll change it to this surprised guy. So how's everybody doing? Can I get a couple of unshy people to put their cameras on and tell me? All right. I heard a very good and then some Zoom noise. So I'll just assume the rest of that was also very good. Hi, Brendan. How are you?
Good. How are you?
All right. Thanks. So nice workstation you have there. A lot of glass. Ryan, you should be able to give me host, like co-host permissions, maybe. I think it's not really much. Oh, I am the host now. Ryan
figured it out.
Awesome. Thank you.
And like we said, we're still letting people trickle in, so just go ahead and show your pretty faces. And
right.
Say hi.
Now is the time to kibitz. It is fine. So can I get a couple of quick thoughts from people, what they're expecting from this? I won't call on Brendan just yet because he was already, kind enough to show his camera. And if nobody wants to answer, I'm going to start picking on people.
So I haven't done 3D printing at all, really. So I'm just here to get an intro into 3D modeling by adding and subtracting volume as opposed to working with meshes. I don't want to work with meshes.
Awesome.
Yeah, maybe some 3D printing tips. I'm not sure.
Okay. I will definitely keep that in mind. Thank you so much, John. That's exactly what this talk is going to be about. So I might as well get started. I see, someone said brief overview with limit of accuracy and precision. That's good. I'll talk about that. The use of TinkerCAD as an educational tool. I will talk about that. So yeah, that's great. And someone says, at our own, is that a full-size 3D print of your head in the background? Absolutely. This is a full-sized 3D print of my head. So actually, it's a little bit bigger than my head. It's like double size so that you can wear it if you want. And I will have a slide on that too. I came prepared. All right. So how about it? Should we get started? All right. Okay. And once again, if anybody wants to turn their cameras on, that is absolutely fine. One of my jobs I'll talk about is I do teach children, and I'm used to being on Zoom and trying to get everybody to talk while they pretend that their cameras don't work and stuff like that. So let's share our screen. And let's start our presentation. So hi, everybody. Welcome to our talk. I'm going to be talking about so-called TinkerCAD for engineers. It's a little bit weird to say. It's kind of like saying Legos for plastic surgeons or something, because TinkerCAD is meant generally for children and for education. But I'd like to show you that it's still possible to make some pretty good CAD drawings with good, basic 3D design principles with TinkerCAD, even though it's, such an easy interface. And this is just a little thing I made for fun, not really for engineers. This is a flying robot narwhal for a robotics team that I supervised. And this was their mascot. So I just whipped this up in TinkerCAD real quick, and it's one of the very popular models. And I do have a link here. I can share it if you do want to edit this or print your own. So here's a little bit about me. I'm an adjunct at Lawrence Tech in Southfield, Michigan. I have a bachelor's degree in biochemistry. So, a bit of a science background before engineering. I've also studied nematodes, so worms. My master's is in biomedical engineering, and this is where I studied microphotography. And that's where I mainly got my CAD experience. So I started really from nothing, no kind of CAD ability, and I brought that into making my own microscopes and my own scanners. One of those, the red one, is one of them behind me. It's a 3D printer that I converted into a 5-axis microscope. And I also teach Python at the MYE Foundation based in Troy. And they also teach TinkerCAD. I don't teach TinkerCAD there, but they have really great TinkerCAD teachers. So if you do want your kids to learn about 3D modeling, I strongly, strongly recommend you check out the MYE Foundation. Really amazing teachers. And finally, for anybody who saw my 3D printed head a little bit earlier, I made this as a joke that I was going to wear it at the beginning of the pandemic instead of a mask. But I strongly recommend you just wear a mask. It doesn't work as well as you might expect for that. Also, you can't see. All right, so here is TinkerCAD. So, TinkerCAD, as you might have already known now, it's a set of free online tools designed for education. It's mainly known for the ability to 3D model, like this copy of a digital microscope that I made. But it's also useful for doing other things. You can program Arduino, and you can even do electronic simulations. Like I had a MATLAB assignment that I actually did in TinkerCAD instead because it was a little bit easier. So there's a lot of capability with TinkerCAD. And the motto is easy to use. So I know John's gonna be very happy about that, but it's phenomenally easy to get started. I'll show you. My plan is to give you the basic instructions and then let you loose, because it's really just drag and drop. And you drag and drop these things called holes and solids. And it's exactly like you'd imagine. These holes take a bite out of the solids, and you end up with a more complicated model. And then you can also do stuff like import existing 3D models. So you can tinker with people's existing files. And then if you do want to expand your ability with TinkerCAD, there are these things called shape generators for making complex shapes programmatically. And then you can export the files into a program, Fusion 360, which is a more advanced CAD program made by the same company. And you can use that to do more advanced CAD work. But don't rely on it. I'm just going to basically show you the basics for today. So I'm going to show you a few things that I've made in TinkerCAD, things you can do, with TinkerCAD. This one is an example of it's a little container. That's all it is. It's the specialized dipping bucket for 50 milliliter graduated, 50 milliliter centrifuge tubes. And you just put these little parts in here. It's got holes in it. You dip it into the liquid and it cleans the parts. And these parts are actually, these are metal copper 3D prints. And I washed them in hydrochloric acid. And I just didn't have a way to dip them in there. I was pouring them out into a bowl, and it was dangerous and not easy. And it works great. It took 10 minutes to design. It costs maybe 3 cents worth of plastic, if that. And it works just as well as any Teflon version you could buy for, several $100s. Here's another category of things you can do. So you can make things to fix your broken equipment. So I actually, for a little while, I had a 3D printer resale business. I got returned printers from Amazon.com, and then I refurbished them and resold them. And I actually got several printers that came broken with this broken bracket, and I copied the bracket from scratch in TinkerCAD, 3D printed it, good as new. So if you have some weird piece of equipment, you probably know, maybe if you want to get it fixed, it costs like $8,000 or something. maybe you can design it yourself and fix it. You can copy just like little parts, so if you're working on a project and you want a visual aid, for instance, if you have like this motor, or if you have, this is a micro switch, you might have seen before, or just like little brackets and things like that. You can copy them for visual aids for presentations. And these are dimensionally very accurate, down to a tenth of a millimeter. All you really need is a pair of calipers and some patience. And then this is what I said that I learned. I learned CAD while working on a project involving microphotography. And so this is actually a 3D scanner for very small things made entirely out of Blu-ray players. I'm sorry, does someone have a question? No, someone entered with their microphone on. So this is a 3D scanner made out of Blu-ray players. It's all made in TinkerCAD. And how I designed it is that all the parts snap together. So right here, this is actually two pieces. It holds this digital microscope. And this one piece snaps into the other piece. And the benefit of that, you don't need screws. It's easy for children. They can just pop it into place. And it works pretty well. So the precision that you need from TinkerCAD is just as good for simple parts like this as with any professional CAD program. If you say it to be a certain size, it will be that size. And then this is just showing you that same project, how I have it laid out. TinkerCAD isn't great with version control. So one thing I'll do is I'll just kind of have everything out in a really big build space. And I'll just have everything there. And then I'll be able to, keep track. I'll maybe say like the oldest things are on the left and the newest things are on the right. And then I said this was going to be a very short talk before our workshop. So finally, we have an example of something you can't make in TinkerCAD. I'm not even sure what this is. I just Googled, big, scary, complex CAD design. But basically, if it looks like this, if you want to have like this big exploded model with rendered textures and articulating parts and, like finite element analysis, you can't do that. All right. TinkerCAD is made for putting shapes together. So if you want to do some kind of like complex simulation, you really should just get started with professional CAD software. Like I said, it is possible to export things from TinkerCAD into other software. So there is room to expand, but you might find you get so good at TinkerCAD that it's not even worth it to transition for most things you want to make. All right, so any questions so far just about the general concept of TinkerCAD, what you think you can and cannot do?
Does it have any like sculpting features, kind of like ZBrush?
Like some kind of organic design?
Yeah.
So
like if you're making biological stuff that has, lumpy contours.
So I really would recommend like Mesh Mixer or Mimics for something like that. So, there are free professionals, CAD software that can do that. There is, I'll show you, there is a scribble tool where you can make curved shapes, but it's really not great for that. So great question. Any others? All right, should we get started on actually doing something? Yeah. All right. So with that, I'm going to actually just post this link in the chat because, we don't want to have to type it. Oh, congratulations, Natalie. She says she's getting married in Southfield, Michigan. That's awesome. All right. So I just posted this, this link in the chat. And what I'd like for everyone to do is I sent you a link earlier, but if you didn't go to it, that's fine, is go to this link. And I'm going to go here too. I just posted in this chat for Zoom. And let's go to this link. And we can join this workshop. So I see here, I saw there were about 100 people who signed up, but I see about 25 people here. So we have plenty of room. So you can, once you get here, you can either join with your username. You can like just make an account, or you can join as a guest. So if you join, let's go back there. If you join as a guest, join with nickname, just say guest and then type in a number between 1 and 40. I have 40 slots. So I'm going to say guest 13 because that's what I did yesterday. And you'll get a place with designs. You can make something new. You can go to circuits or code blocks, or you can even take a lesson if you want. So there are tons and tons of lessons besides the one I'm giving you now. But today we're going to be working on the 3D Designs tab. So I'm just going to wait about a minute. I'm going to put this back up. I'm going to wait just a minute for everyone to catch up, and then we will move on to the demo, okay? And if you do want to give me like a raised hand on Zoom, that would be awesome, just so I have a general idea. I don't expect everyone to do it, but if I see, like half the class, then we will be good. Thank you, everybody. So just a few more seconds and I think we'll be good. And if anyone is having trouble, obviously post a comment or just turn on your microphone and let me know, okay? Awesome. Okay. All right, I think we should get along. You guys are about 30 times faster than my students, give yourself a hand. Awesome. So now we're here and we can make a new design or start from an existing one. I think I'm gonna open up an existing design and I'll play with that. But most people, if you want, you can just start an existing one. But I will add this link to the chat if you want to open up, kind of a relatively simple shape and see how, I built it just out of smaller component shapes. Okay, so I did post this. And once you join the class, you can edit this. So if I click on this, whoops, that's in Firefox. So if I go to this link now, there will be an option to copy and tinker by Noselace, that's me. And if I say copy and tinker, we get to a copy of this switch. Hi, Francis. You just showed up, so I'm just going to post these links in the chat again. Go to the first link I posted and join the class. You can just make an account and you will be able to use TinkerCAD, okay? All right, are we on either a blank file or this existing file? Awesome, thanks, Nicole. Okay, so let me mute that and get started. So here we are. Here is our interface. We can use the right mouse, click and turn around, right mouse, click and turn around. We can use our middle mouse, our scroll wheel. We can scroll in and out. And I expect most of you, you can just play around with this, but I'd like to show you first. We can move in and out. We can click on an object with the left mouse click, drag it and move it along. We can pan by clicking on the middle mouse and moving around. And those are really your basic controls. There are some more with Control and Shift, and I'll show you those if they come up. But let's start by just putting a couple things together. So it's as easy as this. You click on the box, drag it into the screen, and there it is. You can move it precisely by clicking on these arrows. If you click on these arrows, it'll move up and down, and it'll show you first how high up it is and how high you moved it in that one motion. You can always press Control Z to go back. And to change the size of an object, we have these white boxes here. So click on the white box and put in a number, and the object will stretch in that dimension. Brenda, do you have your hand raised or just from before? Okay, all right. And if you do have a question, just, speak up, no problem at all. Okay. Kristen asked what the class code was. There's no class code, just use the link. Okay. Let's just try combining a shape real quick. I have this solid box, and I'm going to grab this hollow cylinder. For now, I'm just going to move it by dragging it. And I'm going to bring it into this box. We can see where it's penetrating into the box. And we can also see that the top of the cylinder, which is 20 millimeters high, and the top of the box, which is 20 millimeters high, we can tell that they're perfectly flush, perfectly flush, because the top is shimmering. So if we were to make this a little bit higher, we wouldn't see any more shimmering. So if you want to make sure that they're perfectly touching, you can do that. And if I select both of these at the same time, we see that two shapes are selected. And I can hit the group button. So up here are some extra controls. So at the top right, we have a group button. And if I group these, now it is one shape. Congratulations, you learned TinkerCAD. You did it. I will show you some more tips and tricks, but that is the essential. That is everything you do. You bring shapes together, you position them in the right way, you change their heights or their widths and stuff, and then you combine them to create a new shape. And you just do that over and over. So for instance, this switch right here, which is a little bit more complicated, note, by the way, it is a different color. So if you click on this solid button where it's red, click on that, you do get more colors. So you can always change them. You can even make it transparent if you want. And I'm going to click on this, and now I'm going to ungroup it. So next to the grouping button, I have an ungroup button. And if I do that a bunch of times, I can see all of the component shapes that make up this piece. I don't want to update. And I can see that this, slightly more complicated is just made up of a bunch of shapes. Let's see how many. 22, 23. So this switch was just made up out of 23 individual shapes, just pretty much entirely squares and circles. Here's a rectangle, here's a rectangle, here's a cylinder, and so on. And from that, you end up with a nice looking little model. So I'm going to pause for a moment and ask if there are any questions so far. Yeah, John.
What if you need to move like a hole you placed very early in the process, and then you've applied another dozens of grouping operations to create additional holes, but you just want to move the first one? What do you do?
Well, it gets very complicated. So yeah, the truth is if you have a lot of individual pieces, it does kind of get a little disorganized. If you double click on this, it will actually like separate out one individual piece. So for instance, right now, this is all one piece. If I just want to move one of these things, I can double click on it, and then I can double click on it again, and I can like separate out this one piece. And then I can, just ungroup this one piece, double click on it, and do like that. So I really recommend just honestly try what is the most obvious thing to do. Like if you're frustrated, double click on it and things like that. And sometimes you'll just be really surprised. It's really intuitive. But yeah, it can get a little complicated if you have lots of pieces making up a part. Okay. So has anybody actually started following along, or are you all just like, watching me so far?
I'm fiddling with things.
Okay, all right. Kritika, was it? I saw, you gave me a smile. So does that mean you're following along or no?
Yeah, it's fun.
Awesome. Okay.
There's a couple questions in chat for you.
Oh, sure. Awesome. Okay. So I have, how did you select both objects? That's from Nicole. And all I did is I clicked and then I dragged, and it creates, just like on Windows or a Mac, it creates this box, and then it'll select all of the objects within this area. So I just clicked and dragged, and then they're all together. Okay. All right. Ureni asks, oh, right. Okay. She answered the question for me. All right, and then Ben asked a question and then figured it out. So far, a lot of people are asking questions and then figuring it out, which is great. Okay. Ben, I'm going to show. Ben says, how do you change orientation of a shape like a cylinder? I haven't showed this yet. Thank you for reminding me. So I'm going to get rid of my box. I can just hit delete. And I have the cylinder. And there are these double arrows. So these double arrows right here, if you click on it, whoops. See these double arrows? You can rotate the object and it'll show you the angle. And I strongly, strongly, strongly recommend everybody use the shift key. So hit the shift key when you rotate with these arrows, and it'll rotate in jumps of 45. Or if you bring your mouse a little bit further back, actually just 45, okay? So most of the time you do want to just do that in jumps. And also just click on the number and you can type in an exact angle and it'll rotate more precisely. So I would add, I really strongly recommend, it's very tempting to just click on the corner and just drag it to change the shape. But I strongly, strongly, strongly recommend, if you're making parts for real engineering use, please put in a number directly. So that way you always have an exact number that you're working with. Okay. Nicole says, I see little arrows around each head that allows you to adjust the orientation. That's true. That's awesome. Okay. I guess Silk asks, I'm having trouble ungrouping, but she figured it out. So yeah, just at the top right, there's an ungroup button. Okay. Ben asks, is the default dimensions millimeters or can that be changed? I think you should always use millimeters. They're the best unit. But if you are in America, you can hit edit grid at the bottom right. So at the bottom right of my screen, there's this edit grid button. Click on that, and then we can change our grid. So we can change from millimeters to inches. And we can also change the size of our grid. So if I can say it's going to be 10 inches by 10 inches in this case, and our workspace just got a little bit bigger. And if I click on something, now I see that it's in units of inches. And so for instance, this box is now 1 inch cubed, but I prefer millimeters. You can also use bricks, by the way. So if you want to, you can play in brick format. So at the top right, this is just for fun. There's a blocks. And so if your kid plays Minecraft, you can convert everything into Minecraft bricks and, you know, make everything blocky. Or like for Legos, you can like convert this into Legos. So yeah, literally Legos. There's my switch. All right, let's go back to 3D design now. Okay, let's see, any more questions so far? Okay. All right, I'd like to show another couple of tips and tricks that are really super useful, okay? Everyone please pay attention to this one. This is the most important thing I'm gonna teach you today, and it's the align tool. And the align tool is select 2 or more objects. And then at the top right, we get this new thing available, says align. And if I click on the align tool, I get these black circles. And when I click on the black circles, everything gets aligned either on the edges or in the middle. And I can use this, even if I have a very complex part, I can use this to very precisely move the objects evenly in relation to each other. And this is the most underused tool and the most useful tool. You should be using this constantly, this align tool. And there's one more trick with that. And if I select both objects and I hit align, if I then select one of the objects, if I click on one object, that object will remain stationary. So if you don't do that, they'll both move. But if you select one of the objects, that is the object that will remain stationary during the align movements. So if you have any questions about that, please ask me. Now I'm just going to play around with the align tool for a minute. Boom, in the middle. Whoop. You can also use a shift click to select multiple objects. So instead of just using a drag, you can hit shift click, just like on Windows for files. Here's another trick if you have circles. So you might have noticed that when you take a shape, you have all of these options available to you. So most of these are pretty self-explanatory. But for instance, with the circles, see, right now it's actually more like a 20 decagon. It's got 20 sides. Very rarely in CAD is there actually something that's a true circle. They're approximations. So if you want to make it more like a circle, you can change the number of sides to be up to 64. And there actually is a way to go beyond that if that's not good enough for you. So you can change the number of sides. Very useful. Or if you have a box, you can bevel the box kind of by adding a radius, and eventually it just becomes a sphere. So that's how I made this switch underneath, is I actually have a beveled box.
Question.
Sure.
In the number of sides for a circle, when the file's exported or printed, will the final print reflect the precision of that arc, or is the number of sides just cosmetic for rendering?
No, it's absolutely true. So if I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to have 2 circles, one with a few sides, and then one with many sides. And now I'll show you how to export a file for 3D printing. Just going to get rid of these extra things. I'm going to connect these actually with this box here, just so you can see that there's one part. and I will align them with the align tool so that it's perfectly centered. So all of the parts are now perfectly aligned. And I'm going to group them. This is my part, so you can see the left side is much more bumpy. And now to export it, I go to export. So if you click on the object and then you hit export, you'll see an option for 3D printing or for laser cutting. So I do use this to create laser cuts too. It'll just be the profile of the part. And you can say export as STL. And I'm going to go into my CAD program, my slicer for 3D printing. I use Flash Print because I have mostly Flash forward printers. And I'm just going to drag this file in here. And there is my file. So you can very clearly see that it is not just a cosmetic change. It is a real physical change. This side is much smoother. So good question. Thank you. And if we were to print it, we would see that too. Not printed metal, it's printed PLA. And we can see our print and that it does reflect how we designed it. Okay, I see another question. Kristen says, is undo the only way to remove a set alignment? I'm not sure exactly what your question is. Do you mean if they're like combined or if they're aligned in a certain way? Maybe you could rephrase the question, that'd be helpful. Emu says, is that the only way to fillet the edges? So if you want to do proper filleting, yeah, the main way is to change the shape. You can also send this to there is a send to, I was going to show you, maybe they changed it recently. There is a way to send the file to Fusion 360 so that you can do more professional filleting. But I think this is a good opportunity then to show you the shape generators and some other shapes, because I've only shown you cylinders and boxes, which is 99.9% of the shapes that I use. But we also have these shapes called shape generators. So go from in the right side of the screen, go to where it says basic shapes. And if you go down, you'll actually see more shapes available. So for instance, here are numbers and letters if you want to adorn your parts. You have things like connectors. So you can use these connectors if you want to have, they have lots of already made parts for you. Or a lot of little things for fun, like crayons, thumbtacks, just because again, it's for kids. And then here we have these things, these shape generators, and we can go to featured. And you'll see some more complex parts that you can readily use, like screw threads. So these are made where you can say, you can define a screw exactly how you want it, and it will generate it. So you don't have to know really about, if you're going to do this in professional CAD, there's a really good way to do it, but it's not going to just be drag and drop like this. So there's a very low barrier to entry. And then specifically for filleting, I believe I think it's in the all shape generators. There is a tool for just filleting. Let's see if I can find that. I think it's like 3 or 4. But yeah, most of the time you want to make just very, very simple shapes just over and over. You're not going to be making complex curved surfaces, but there are ways to do it. Oh, here we go. Here's a cycloid. So you could use this if you wanted to take a bite out of a part. So if you have well, actually, you don't even need this, but if you have a box like this, I'm not practicing what I'm preaching because I'm just, dragging the thing to move it. You could make this into a hole. So you click on it and then turn it into a hole. I'm going to align them, just, practice something that I preach. And if I were to, let's make this line one more way. Now, if I were to group these, I can punch a hole out of this part. So that's not quite filleting, but it is close. And there are ways, if you just have to be creative about it. But like I said, you don't want to make things that are too complicated with this method. But it definitely is possible. Oh, there's a fillet tool. Here we go, meta fillet. So that was page 12 on the shape generators. So I can just take that, turn it into a hole, move it over to an object, and combine them. Let's see. You're welcome. All right, the handout space shapes may be helpful in laying out the rooms in our new house, XD. That's right, Nicole. Okay. Would anyone like to see a little bit more advanced functionality just to be aware of what's possible? All right. I've been using the right click to just move around. That's what I prefer. But if you want, you can just click on this box at the top right and move it. Top left, excuse me. Or you can click on it if you want to get a very specific view. You can get that exact angle. This is good if, for instance, if you're taking screenshots, or if you want to make sure things are like not touching. You can change your projection. Also at the left, at the bottom, you can go from an orthographic to a perspective view, which can be helpful, again, if you're taking like screenshots. So if sometimes something I might do is I will move this object over to the white area, go from a top-down view, and then change my projection, I guess, to an orthographic view. If you make it white, then you can actually take a screenshot of this, and it just looks like a regular, vector style drawing, which you can use for presentations, or you can import this into like a laser cutting program. Actually, you don't even need to do that. You can just say export as SVG, and then we will get this. It's kind of hard to read it here, to see it here, but we'll actually get this shape, this just the outline of our shape, so we could laser cut it if we wanted. Okay. Another thing we can do, which I actually didn't know for like the first 2 years of using this, is there is a way to change your work plane. So right now we're working in this work plane. But in the top right here, there is a work plane tool over here. And if I click on the work plane tool, I can drag this and see there's this arrow. It shows you which way is up, and I can change my work plane. So I can put my work plane over here, and now suddenly I'm actually working on the edge of this object. So now when I grab, for instance, this box and I put it down, it's orthogonal to my work plane. So this is not something I use very frequently, but when you do need it, it's extremely useful. And to cancel it, just press the work plane and put it back, on your original work plane. For instance, if you do have like a cylinder and you want to put something on the side, rather than picking up and then moving it up and trying to position it right, you can just select the side as your work plane. And then when you bring your box in, it'll already be there. So I think that's very useful. Just be aware that it exists. I'm going to cancel that because it really confuses me. There's also a ruler function. So right next to the workplace tool, there's a ruler, which I also don't use. Maybe I shouldn't admit that. But if you put the ruler in, anything that's within the bounds of the ruler, it will show you the dimensions from point to point. So, I usually just click on it and I see the dimensions, but this could be very helpful too. Here's a useful keyboard shortcut. If you click on something, I'm going to get rid of this ruler. Dismiss ruler. If you click on something, like one of the corners, and then you hit Shift when you move it, it'll resize it isotropically. If when you hit Shift when you move it, I think that's quite useful. When we were talking about organic shapes, I mentioned the scribble tool. So that's one of the basic shapes over here. So you have the scribble tool. And if you click on that and you put it somewhere, you'll get this new window where you can actually, this is much more easy on a tablet, but where you can draw and say stuff like, hi. And then when you say you're done, that will be imported as one shape. So you can, if you do need something like some kind of weird arbitrary shape, you can do it this way. Some more useful shapes in the common shapes. Again, sorry, is there a question? Nope. So again, if there are useful, the most useful shapes are just the cylinders in the box. But one other one that I use all the time is the cone. And the cone is actually kind of like an advanced cylinder. So the cone, if you imagine that the top radius of the cone and the bottom radius are the same, then it's just a cylinder, right? It's just a cylinder. It's just a cylinder is just a cone with the top and bottom radius that are the same. And so what's extremely useful for me is sometimes I'll have like a hole where I have two parts that fit together. And I want to, they're not going to be exactly the same size, the hole and the part that fits together. So what I'll do is I'll make the top radius just a little bit smaller than my bottom radius. I'll exaggerate it now. And you'll get this gradient. And then if you do have a, something that, like if this is a plug that it goes into, it's going to combine these with the align tool. Group. Not a very good part. It will be much easier to drive it in with that slope. So I use this cone tool all the time to just provide a gentle slope on my cylinders. All right. Okay. So I've been talking for a while now. And so I think what I'm going to do is I'd like to show you something. And oh, one more thing I'd like to show you before I go there. And that's importing files. So next to the export button is an import button. And this is honestly probably what TinkerCAD is greatest for, is not making everything from scratch, but just altering someone's file a little bit to fit your needs. So who here has heard of Thingiverse? So Thingiverse, I will post this in the chat, is a free public repository for 3D model files. And I'm going to type in like the word, do people like ducks? All right, I'm going to type in the word duck because I got a couple smiles out of that. I'm going to go to this duck file. I'm going to click on the thing files and I'm going to download the STL. I've got this file downloaded. You can see that I didn't think of the duck just now. I actually secretly downloaded it already. Ruin the illusion. And if I go to import, I can drag my 3D file here. It'll tell me what the measurements of it are. And I can say import. This is a simple file, so it should be pretty easy. And there's my duck. And what you might notice is I can't ungroup this. There's no ungroup button. This is just one piece. And that kind of makes sense because I got it from somewhere. I didn't get the instructions for how to make it. I just got the final result. But now that we have this duck, we can modify it. We can make him stretchy. You know, we can give him a little hat. Yeah, let's get a, this is changed from TinkerCAD for engineers to TinkerCAD for people who like ducks. All right, let's give him a radial fins as a hat. This is not a very good demo. And I can use the align tool. I'll always use the align tool. And I can give him a little radial fins hat. Select them both, group it, and now he has a hat. And so you can just imagine that if this were a real useful part, it's very easy to just grab an existing part someone made. You can add like a hole or something. You can enlarge things. You could slice off part of it. So for instance, you can take like a box. Woo! And let's say I just want the bottom of the duck. Maybe I don't want the top of the duck. I can just go down, align these. And a lot of the time it is actually okay to just, manually move it. If you are just like trying to cut off a major portion, just don't get into the habit of doing that with everything. And now I can group these two things. And now I just have the top of the duck. Well, I missed a little bit of the tail, if that's what that is. And now I just have the top of the duck. So maybe this happens all the time. It's kind of scary. It happens all the time if you are if you see something, a file you want, and you're like, oh, I just want the handle or something like that, is you can just grab components like this, and then now you can just use these as shapes. You can just use it as any other shape and just combine them together like Legos. Okay. All right, so I've been talking for a really long time without getting a whole lot of questions. Does anybody want like a task to try and do? Like I can give you a specific thing you can try and make? Or are you ready to go for lunch? Brendan's ready to go for lunch. All right, Brendan can take a nap if he wants. That is absolutely okay. But I'm just going to give you this challenge. I just showed you all this, and I said I showed you an overview. And really, the best way to learn TinkerCAD is by doing. So if you don't have a specific thing you have in mind to make, I suggest trying to figure out how to make a wrench like this. So you can make this out of 6 shapes. So just try to brainstorm what shapes this is made out of. Use the align tool, make it out of reasonable dimensions, and give it a go. Okay. And I will be here for as long as it takes for anybody who wants to stay. I think probably I just gave you the overview and we're close to the time. So I imagine, I'm not sure if Ryan wants to pipe in, but I imagine we are, you can say you came to the webinar if you want to leave now. And then otherwise, I'll be here for like another 35 minutes to help anybody through this project.
I can definitely extend the meeting another 30 minutes, no problem.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to try to make this too, but I'm going to just be available for anybody who wants to ask me questions or try to make it, okay? All right. And again, this is a workshop, so if you have something you would like to ask or anything, please just let me know, okay?
So I just have kind of a general meta question, not related to the tutorial.
Awesome.
But if my end goal is to get my students proficient in modeling and we use SolidWorks, do you see TinkerCAD as a good like intro to before they touch SolidWorks, or would you recommend just entry-level tutorials right in the software that they'll be using?
How old are they?
They're university students.
So here's the problem. The problem is that I see a lot of people who are semi-proficient at TinkerCAD and then not at all proficient in SolidWorks.
Okay.
But the problem is that they were first introduced to SolidWorks. So it depends kind of on what your university, if they have SolidWorks as a standard, or if all of the teachers are currently fighting for what they're used to. So like, Mimix, NX, SolidWorks, Fusion 360, AutoCAD. There's so many. So is that kind of the situation?
So we're the only engineering program, so we kind of make the rules. And so the initial offering was SolidWorks, but it's only in the second year, so.
Okay. So I see more people making useful things with TinkerCAD, like in real life, like when it comes down to it, they forget everything they learned in class and they want something that's easy. But TinkerCAD is not very highly respected for, if you're going to put it on your resume, they're going to be like, why are you putting this on your resume? So like you can get really, really good at it, but I would probably recommend, if you know how to use SolidWorks, then you get them to use SolidWorks because it's respected, it's good. It just has a much higher learning curve than TinkerCAD does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. Got something else in the chat. Oh, you just asked that. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a little disappointing because, like, for instance, I know how to use Fusion 360, but not as well as I know how to use TinkerCAD. But there's certain things you can only do in a professional, CAD program. So, for instance, I have like, here, project files. Here, I'll show you a couple things. I will find this. So like, for instance, I showed you my scanner like on TinkerCAD, and I have these rendered drawings. Okay. So this was for a patent application, which didn't go through, but you needed good engineering drawings that were like labeled. And I made the file in TinkerCAD, and then I exported them to Fusion 360. So Fusion 360 then was able to do like animated renderings, add glossiness, or render as like, this view. And you can kind of do this in TinkerCAD, but it's much more practical to do in a professional program. And then especially if you want to do things like, finite element analysis or articulation, that's impossible in TinkerCAD. So I'm going to make a wrench. Should I? Oh, yeah, Ben, what's up?
Well, I put it in the chat, but
Okay.
when you're aligning the shapes, is there a way to like switch the side it aligns from?
I think probably. Let me try, and we'll see if this is what you're intending. I'm just gonna have two boxes. One, by the way, I copied it. I said Control C and Control V, so you can copy it. There's also this mirror function which I haven't shown you, but you can like mirror it in one direction, which doesn't do anything for this because it's just it's not a stereoisomer of anything. So I'm just gonna rotate that. Okay, so let me just try what I think you're saying. So I'm gonna hit align. I click on this, and then I don't understand your question. Could you rephrase it then?
Well, basically, when I was trying to make the wrench, I was trying to get the cylinder to mate at the end of the rectangle, but it would only go either inside the square or inside the rectangle and not like tangent to the square.
Okay. So yeah, so I think I know what you're saying. So yeah, so if you click on this and then you do that, it's going to be like embedded, right? what
Yeah,
you're saying?
exactly.
Yeah. So what you do then is just see how big this is, and it's 2. So just move it 2 millimeters.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry, don't have a better answer for that. And then, for that, you're going to want to have it embedded in a little bit anyway, just so that it's, not just tangential. Here, how about 9 millimeters? What you can do, by the way, is where there's the edit grid. Oh, we're still on units of bricks. So I'm going to go back to millimeters. And then you can change the snap. So for instance, when you click on something and you move it with the keyboard, it moves 1 unit. And right now it's on 1 millimeter, but you can change it to 5 millimeters. Hey, it's not changing. Oh, I guess, oh yeah. Oh, because it was on units of bricks before. So this is like 5 millimeters right now, or you could do like 0.1. I very much recommend you pretty much keep it at 1 millimeter most of the time, because you'll notice that things get, misaligned. You'll be off by like 0.1 millimeter or something. And that's the worst part, is if you lose like 0.1 millimeter somewhere.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. All right, and Brendan says, thank you. You're welcome, Brendan. I think they might have left already. Yoreni says, is there any 3D printer brand that you can recommend that is compatible with these files and is economic and can get good resolution? So I think Nicole left, but you're welcome. Yeah, so someone just entered, and I hope they are not in a different time zone because they missed the whole talk. But yeah, so right now, this is probably the best budget starter 3D printer, like for a classroom, is this one right here. This is a FlashForge Finder. So it's a FlashForge Finder. I think they're like $300 now on Amazon. So really affordable. Very good resolution, very, very easy to use, very reliable. But there's a lot of 3D printers out there. You can get a decent 3D printer used for like $60, like a monoprice mini or something. But yeah, I'll say I recommend the FlashForge brand, is very good. And not just because that's the one that I specialized in buying and fixing and selling. So if it's 20, I moved it 10 so that it's perfectly in the center of our cylinder. And then you see all these shapes, but when you group them, it just becomes one shape. So that's 3 shapes so far for making a wrench. I see in the chat. You're welcome, John. And you're welcome, Karthika. It's just you and me. Sorry. And to make a hexagon, I'm going to use the polygon tool. So I'm just going to, I see that it's 20, so I'm going to make this 20 millimeters tall, tie to. Oops, it's actually 8 millimeters tall, so I'm going to make it 8. And then I'm going to say 6 sides, so it's a hexagon. And let's just make it, I'm going to isotropically scale it. That looks about right. Make it 8 again, and I'll make it a hole. Align it towards the circle. And ta-da, I've got 1/2 of a wrench. And for the other side, I can use a roof, or I can use a pyramid, or I can use a three-sided polygon, also known as a triangle. I'm going to rotate this. Isotropically scale it. Whoops. A little bit more. This is when it does help to change your units, because if you change your units to like 1 millimeter, you can scale it in smaller increments. And then I see that it is 11 millimeters wide. So I was trying to make it look like this. So I'm just going to add a rectangle to the end of that triangle. Whoops, let's get a solid one. And I'm going to make that 11 millimeters wide and the same height, so 8 millimeters tall. Clink. And align them. So I like to combine small subshapes together, but I don't like to combine the big components until the very end. This is where it's helpful to use the snap tool, because I can see that I was able to just move them with the keyboard and they were perfectly aligned. And this is a trick I didn't show yet, but I can tell that they're perfectly aligned. I can make one a hole temporarily, and then I can do the same shimmer trick I showed before, where it's shimmering, and I can see that they're perfectly touching. And then I'll just make it back into a solid, select them both, group. And the proportions don't really look right. I'm just going to make this maybe a little bit smaller. How about 6 millimeters? And I'll make it, how about 15? Group these again, turn it into a hole, and now I can combine it with, and that kind of looks right. It's not spectacular. Let's see, maybe a little bit wider. See, we're not following a diagram right now. That looks a little better. Whoops, I ungrouped it, but I can just align it. Won't make a difference. And now I can group everything. Ta-da, I've got a wrench. Yay. All right, I see one more thing in the chat. All right, Ben says thank you. You're welcome, Ben. I think Ben's gone. Okay. All right, is anyone who's shy and hasn't turned their video on? Most of the people have left, so if you want to ask any questions, now's the time. How about you, Miss Hubbard? No?
No questions. Thank you. It was really informative.
Okay. My pleasure. All right. Bye. So, okay. All right. So I think we're pretty much wrapping up now. There's no more people sharing their screen. That's, kind of how I teach. So if there's nobody sharing their screen, I think we're pretty much wrapped up. But I can stay if anybody wants to. If you want to just post in the chat, I can stay for a few more minutes and answer some more questions.